flip phones
Flip
were.
phones are the best though.
Yeah, like I had to
You get
text
your message.
like
No.
at SCR, I had to text Miss Beaback I was there, right?
So
It took me
dramatic.
10 minutes.
Remember
And I
when
had
you
to
lost
keep
your
pressing
phone?
the key.
I remember that all freshman year
Yeah.
and sophomore year.
Conversation.
I know you
Oh
want
my
to
Not
God.
one over the summer. What?
Oh my God.
Okay, ready?
Wait.
Wait, I don't want to leave, but because of her though. I don't want her to.
Okay.
I know, but like, I'm
I
trying to
don't-
find
actually-
a lull
Yeah,
of the
see,
conversation.
I
I'm
don't
gonna
care
leave
that much
anyways.
anymore though, because it's mostly less selfless people.
Yeah, okay, ready?
1, 2, 3.
Mine won.
You just
Nothing.
left it.
I'm gonna leave.
We left our group chat, and now there's gender imbalance again.
Oh,
Alright.
It's Jody.
okay. Ready?
Oh wow, yeah, it's not, yeah.
Okay.
It's like 4 guys in the
Okay.
Is it 4?
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's very tall.
I can't do my problem. All right. You ready?
Yeah.
Josh,
So
ready?
adorable.
19.
Wait.
Okay.
Not
Ready?
We're always
Just go.
ready.
Okay. Time starts now. As the first speaker of the affirmative team, I strongly affirm today's resolution. The Paris climate talks will do more harm than good. So we define today's resolution as a fact resolution. So just some background information. So currently in the status quo, we see talks between in Paris regarding climate change in the world, and this is between 195 countries, including countries such as the U.S., Britain, and superpowers. So we should define the criterion of today's debate as net benefits. So our first contention is that as symbolic action. So these Paris talks are not somewhat of like a new phenomenon. They have been happening actually since the 19th century. So in the status quo, we do agree that there has been global warming, and we have seen these talks in the 19th century to address this problem, and this is according to The Guardian. However, it is still a problem today. So what this clearly shows is that we've been having these talks regarding this problem. However, there's been no solvency, and this is bad because when people see the world leaders meeting, their automatic assumption is that there is going to be results, there is going to be outcome, there's going to be more positive effects. However, there has been no positive effect, there has been no outcome. Instead, what we've seen is that the global warming is still increasing at a rate. We see ocean levels rising, we see temperature increasing, and what we see is people live in this false illusion that because of these climate talks, everything's going to become better, which is not. And these climate talks, this is not as I mentioned, this has been happening before in status quo. And so, like as I said, the impact is that people think there's an outcome and they continue on whatever they're doing. However, there is no outcome from the past. Historically, we have examples to the present. What we see is they make empty promises and they never fulfill them. So we have like a subpoint B about time frame. So in 1997, there were talks, and Tokyo was one city that made an agreement to reduce CO2 emissions. So what we see is this talk was in 1997. However, they actually implemented this plan in 2008, and they only kept it for 4 years after realizing that it wasn't really effective. So what we see is, one, even if they do reach some conclusion, their whole plan is delayed, and therefore it doesn't really solve the problem at that time, and new problems are like popping up as time progresses. Like in the example of Tokyo, it was 11 years since they implemented the plan that they had agreed to, which clearly shows that they're not efficient, and this time frame, the problem of having this plan implemented 11 years from the time they agreed to, is that global warming, one, probably became worse over that time. Two, it's not efficient, and they're ignoring the problem, which is actually hurting the environment and the negative factors of this is just perpetuating the problem of global warming. So what we see is the impact of this is there's no effectiveness, and we see this problem continuing, and there's this false sense of illusion that we are actually solving something when we're not. So our second contention is that of foreign relations. So in 1992, there was another talk in Rio regarding climate change. So the plan was that over the next in 1992 there was talks over climate change, and so So what the countries agreed to is that over the next 5 years, they would work to reduce their CO2 emissions and work to stop the perpetuation of global warming. However, what we saw is that developed countries were arguing with developing countries over their role in the developing country's future. So what we see is that there's actually clashing going on between the two sets of developing and developed countries, and this did not lead to any solution. Instead, because of this clashing, there was no solvency. We did not see any good outcomes of this, and these clashes, the impact of this is there's no solvency, and this actually hurts international relations, because what we see here is that like going on to the present day and age. So currently in the Paris talks, developed countries have proposed a plan to give $100 billion to developing countries to adopt climate change. However, what we see here is the developing countries want more money, and the developed countries don't want to give more money. So what we see here is there's a clashing between the two sets of countries. However, the people who are really hurt here is the population of the developing countries, because they're the ones who do rely on the sources of energy such as gasoline, which do give off CO2 emissions, and for them, going to alternative sources of energy, which is a method being discussed in the Paris talks, such as solar and wind, is not simply feasible for them, because they do not have they don't have the socioeconomic status to achieve that goal. So what we see here is that there's conflict, and the population of the developing countries, they actually have resentment toward the developed countries, because what they're being told by their government is that the problems of the country, more important, the climate problems and the environmental problems, are all because the developed countries don't want to do something. However, because this is the only source of news or information for the people, for their population, this is what they believe, and this resentment is bad because this could hinder solutions or effective or methods that developed countries might want to implement in the developing countries to help them. So with increased resentment, we see a less probability of a solution ever working out, or of a plan to ever be effective. Okay, so I'd just like to stress is that what we see here is that it's the population whose only sources of information is from their government, and they have increased resentment toward developed countries, who are the only people who can help them. So for all the reasons, I strongly affirm today's resolution: the Paris climate talks will do more harm than good.
Yeah.
That one is so
That
strange.
timer's
I
actually
don't
nice.
like that. That
And
timer
timer's like
creeps me out.
I had to find the most loud and annoying.
But it's a happy timer.
Yeah.
It's such a
Lily
Lily
is
tone.
interesting. Oh, this is
Yeah, it kind of like matches your personality.
Really?
No, I mean like it's like Holly calls you lemon, right? So when I think of lemon, I think of like yellow and like happiness. Like I don't know, I'm just dabbling on.
Meilinda,
Okay.
So as we go to roadmap, I'm going to
Like
go
her eyes.
over the affirmative side case and move on to the neg case. Time starts now. So as the first speaker of the negation side, I strongly negate today's resolution. And so I'll talk about their first contention right now about symbolic action. So I'm going to sort of discuss their contention anyways in one of the contentions for the neg case. So I'll go over it briefly right now. So they're saying that nothing new is happening, that these talks have been happening since the 1900s, and there's no solvencies, and that it's really just empty promises. But these countries, eventually, they'll stop making these empty promises, because once they see, like, people are saying, oh yeah, the government's not fulfilling these promises, then they're going to see that then the government will want to, of course, keep their reputation and, uphold their reputation. And they'll try to make a change in that. Like they'll anyway see in the future that this problem about global warming is going to increase even more, especially this year. So if they don't take any action, really they're going to cause an even bigger problem if they don't discuss it anytime soon.
So, if these talks have been happening for over 100 years, wouldn't the government have realized that their reputation matters? Wouldn't they have done something then?
Okay, so like back then, all the way in the 1900s, the problems weren't. If you compare it to the problem with global warming now, it's a lot lower, right? So now that it's suddenly like skyrocketed practically, they're going to see like, wait, this is a huge problem. They should do something about this, which I think we want to avoid global warming. Yeah. And so yeah, that's about the first contention. So I'll move on to the second contention about the foreign relations. So actually, kind of contrary to what the affirmative team is saying, it'll be harmed even more if these topics aren't considered, because if we just leave this global warming problem alone, it's going to become even worse, and and if these problems aren't even considered, it's going to, of course, get even worse, which is going to harm relations a lot more due to all the problems that will happen. And the affirmative team mentioned about how people of developing countries are the ones who are suffering, and how they're eventually that they will have problems changing to the renewable sources, and because it's too hard to change to solar and all that stuff, all that type of renewable energy. But anyways, eventually, once they're unable to use any more non-renewable sources, they'll anyways have to change to the renewable sources. And anyways, in the long run, if we start doing that now, it's going to somewhat solve our problems a bit. It won't completely solve it, but it'll help. So, and also they talked about, I'm actually going to talk about that anyways in the next contention, so okay, so, and they also talk about the resentment, and if they are somewhat forced to make these changes, then actually they're going to really see how major this problem is, they're going to see how much of a big deal this is, and they're going to start making more changes, which is positive. And I'll move on to the next side's case. So our first contention is about awareness. So even if the problems right now are not completely solved, like absolutely no global warming, we know that it's not going to just happen like that. It's going to take some time. But in the long run, awareness is going to be raised right now, because the other countries will start to see, the other countries will start to try even harder to protect the environment and climate. And even though there has been a lot of failures in the past, since with this always increasing problem, then they're going to start trying to fix it. They're going to start to try. They're going to see how big of a problem this is, and how bad the impact in the end is really going to be. And they're going to see if they don't do something about this now, which right now is a pretty bad situation right now. So if they don't do anything about that now, then it's going to become even worse to the point where they can barely even fix it. So they might as well try now before it's too late. And so if more countries are involved, there's going to be more resources, and that's positive. And the countries right now that are making promises, as I said before, they'll try as hard as they can to fulfill these promises to uphold their reputations. And they probably will fulfill these promises, because right now, as I said before, many times problems are getting even worse with global warming and how much people are using, how much carbon dioxide emissions there are. Sure. Sorry. That's what I didn't. So right now, the countries, if we don't consider this problem, the main people who are really struggling is the poor countries and the less developed countries of the world, and they will really need this help and support, because from the description, they are somewhat less developed countries, so they will need that support more than the countries who are more developed. So, and anyways, we need to start preparing for the inevitable global warming problem. If we don't, we might as well start preparing it now, so we can start solving it even better once everyone's starting to slowly stop the carbon dioxide emissions. And awareness is always a good thing. If people are more aware, then they'll have a better idea of what the problem is. So they'll start slowly, probably trying to fix it, because they know if we don't do this, to stop the carbon dioxide emissions, then the problem's going to just explode, and it'll become even worse in the future. And if global warming really does does get even worse, it's going to be quite problematic for many things, which will impact the people as a whole. And so I'll go over the second contention really quickly right now. So the goal of the climate talks isn't to stop global warming immediately, but the goal is really to add some structure and momentum to the efforts that are already underway. And yeah, so really it's just trying to show people and make a bigger momentum to try to make a change. It's not going to suddenly stop it. It's just, these talks are just a way to start like moving this, making bigger momentum, which is always a good thing because then it'll slowly like, snowball and it'll probably, sorry, give me a second. So probably they'll be, that's pretty much it. I just need to go. I was like, literally, the last minute I had to go. I was like, shoot. Sorry. I ended it really badly. Sorry about that. Warren. I'm sorry. I forgot about this because the previous one is where we got it from. Sorry.
Yeah, but just say that one word. Just say one.
Oh, Warren. Sorry. I forgot to list so many things. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Because my mom was like texting me like,
Say what I want you to say.
wait, I don't know what she wants me to say.
Christie probably knows what I want you to say.
sorry for making the situation worse for you.
Okay. Is that what Davey wants to say? This is so
That's
much
not
pressure.
just what I want to say.
Davey gets so much pressure, and since she's a sophomore too, it really scares me. Okay.
Nobody's so scary.
Scary is
It's
my
okay,
middle
Megan.
name.
Don't worry.
Well,
You're
that's
good.
so rude.
My middle name means
She's
purple
in our
flower.
chat.
Hey guys, that's like the
Wait, what is
opposite.
Wait, really?
Yeah. It
Like
means
a purple flower.
Purple flower.
I don't like you.
Can I call you
You're
purple
literally
flower
what is
now?
your middle name?
What is your middle name?
I'm talking about
Oh, so that's what all you use. Right. Megan, go. You're good. Don't worry.
Okay, it's really big.
Better than mine.
I really don't know how to start this. So for a brief roadmap, I'll be first going over the affirmative team's case and then going over the negation team's case. So our first contention dealt with symbolic action and how there will be no solvency in this meeting because, or these climate talks, because in the past we could see that nothing has happened, and so it actually leads to more detriments and more harms. To this, my opponent stated that nothing, that right now the status quo our global warming and our problems are being a lot worse than it was before, which will pressure governments to actually make a change. However, where do we see this in the status quo? Or in the status quo has already been worsening since the 1990s, and we can see through the affirmative team's examples of Kyoto and Rio how although it's already been worsening, no changes have actually been happening. And my opponents also stated that countries will eventually stop making these empty promises and try to make this change. Well, my opponents are basically assuming, just like how these talks are giving false promises, they're assuming that these countries will actually follow through and actually create impacts, although we cannot, use that probability that will actually come into happen as shown through the evidence of how it never has before. Until even though there was an impact happening and how there was, a law or something that was produced, it actually didn't help the environment at all. And so countries in the status quo haven't been actually responding to these and actually making real changes and mostly false promises, so we can't assume that they're going to do more now. Additionally, they didn't respond to how it's not efficient due to the examples of Kyoto, how it first takes a lot of time in order for it to be enacted, and then the enactment also stays for a shorter amount of time, which shows how it's really ineffective, even though we're going through all these long processes to get these laws and restrictions out. It actually doesn't last a long time. It doesn't take a long time, and so it's inefficient and unreasonable to go through this way. Our second contention dealt with foreign relations and how we'll actually be hurting foreign relations due to the fact that first the conflict between developed countries and developing countries, and how through with the finances of that. And my opponent stated that then environment will cause more problems than the people's, finance relations. However, when governments look at situations like these, they really look at what affects themselves. And so we can see that time and time again, and how, although they see environment as a problem, since it is a problem that we'll see more in the future and not now, they'll be more concerned and more direct about what is happening right now in the status quo. And if their economy will fail due to these talks and how they won't have enough money to get their alternative energy, they will focus more on that instead of something that is far off in the future, because it will affect their own citizens, their own populations, and their own people. And additionally, also my opponent stated that if they're forced to do so, they'll actually be pressured and they will do it. However, we can see through states like the black market and other stuff like that, when people are forced to do something and restricted to do something that they do not want to do, they actually don't listen to that lawful force or law, and they actually are deterred away from it, and they will actually continue doing whatever they want to do, just because restrictions that are unwanted by the people are never followed through. Yes. Okay. And now we're going over onto my opponent's case, which deals with how their first contention deals with awareness and how there'll be, because our environment is worse, as they've stated before, and is worsening quicker, more people will see it and more people will be aware, therefore more change. However, that's actually not as simple as it is, as my opponents state, because as I said before, there are no impacts to this. If there's always been awareness in our status quo. There's been awareness since the 1990s. However, we can see our environment is deteriorating really quickly, and there has been no change, even though there has been these talks. And so we can't assume that the environment will get better just because of these talks. Even gradually better, it may not even happen, because if these talks don't go through, because it's unreasonable, ineffective, as we've seen before, and basically, we can't assume that all these impacts will, fall out in the way that they will. Again, my opponents stated that they will try and probably will enact and enforce actual change. However, again, as I said before, my opponents are assuming that these impacts are happening and that, the governments will suddenly make a change, even though they haven't for many decades, almost a century. And so we can't assume that right now, just because it's worsening, or even though it has been worsening, that they'll actually, change their policies and change the way they've been doing things. Additionally, they say that poor countries need support, and we need support as well. As I said before, we mostly like to look at, or governments mostly like to look at the populations themselves before the world impacts and calculates out. And the superpowers won't care about, the poor countries if this isn't done. And we need to see how these poor countries may not be able to get that support, even though there is that awareness. The second contention dealt with how their goal is to add some structure and momentum into getting this thing done. However, there have been organizations, going out and providing momentum and have been providing some form of, awareness. However, nothing really impactful has been happening so far. Additionally, as I said before in Kyoto, they have been making a change and making policies to have this enacted out. However, Japan is still one of the highest polluted areas due to their carbon emissions, and so we can see that there is no change. And even though we set this momentum, the impacts that will follow will not be carried through. So the Paris talks will do more harm than good because of this delay that's caused by this symbolic action, and how people will actually believe that they're doing something, doing steps to change the world, to make it better, even though they will not. And so people will continue to worsen the environment. And okay, I said a lot of politics.
How long are your timer? Okay, I don't know, it seemed very short.
It does seem very short. I think I said a lot.
It was 7. You said what I wanted you to say.
Really?
Yeah.
Jamie, I'm not scared of you anymore. Actually,
That's good.
It's literally not that hard to. No, I don't, Megan. Such a gold digger.
Okay.
Meilinda had like all the notes on her notebook. She took them all. She did them. So I'm gonna try my best.
Okay.
I literally didn't write down anything.
good. You should have been running. Did you fall?
Oh, no, I flowed. Like,
Nice.
I'm not
From
doing
prep.
so
Oh,
bad.
okay.
So it's okay. I'll go. Do I have to do the motor speech too?
Probably, yeah. It'll be good practice. Do it. Me gusta tu mucho.
I don't like high
There's
cheers.
three.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't feel like I don't want
I need to get. I love candy, but I don't like candy.
Same, Christy.
Alright. You don't like high cheers?
How? How do you do this?
Because we don't know you're green.
Never already.
Okay. So, as a second negation team speaker, I strongly negate the resolution that the Paris talks will do more harm than good. Okay, so first I'm going to be going over my opponent's case, then strengthening our own case. So, the affirmative, okay, their side, their first contention was of symbolic action, and that this has been happening for a long time, and even though there's been a lot of plans, there's not actually anything that's been able to change what's happening. And I also brought up the example of the Kyoto incident, and we'd like to point out, my teammate and I, that this was one instance, and this is not going to be happening all the time because the plan that was in action to stop this is actually a plan that's not similar to the Paris climate talks, because as we mentioned in our case, the Paris climate talks are going to be working to just help kickstart what's already happening and not just change and stop global warming in general, because that's not what they're trying to do. That's not the end goal. The end goal is just to raise awareness and to slowly make the steps to get the gas emissions down. Okay, so the talks are going to be starting awareness, and that's the most important part, because if people aren't aware of what's happening, they're not going to be able to actually stop it. And when the countries come together, they're actually going to be able to make a difference. So also our opponent said the time frame of this, because the Kyoto incident, as I said before, and how the plan isn't efficient because it just ignores the problem. But then this actually isn't true, because even though the talks aren't directly trying to stop what's happening in the global warming, they're raising awareness for what's happening, as I mentioned before. So it's actually going to be helping what's happening, not helping, helping to stop what's happening. So our opponent's second contention was of foreign relations, and they talked about how the developed countries are arguing with the developed nations because not all the developed nations want to contribute money and they're tied to stop this. So what's actually happening now is because when the global warming hits, and because this is an inevitable problem, the developing countries are going to have a way harder time than the developed nations will, because they're not going to have the money or the resources to do this. So then if the developed nations can't help, then they're going to be struggling with this. So by using the Paris talks, they're going to be raising awareness for this, and the developed nations are going to be putting in their time and their money, and they're making a commitment to stop what's happening. And this is the important part of the Paris talks, because the developing nations are going to be needing a lot more help, because especially if we see, for example, of Africa, the global warming is going to hit Africa a lot different than what it's going to hit America, for example. So without America's help and the help of other developed nations, Africa won't be able to pull through it this, because they're not going to have the money or the resources to actually change what's happening. So also, the opposing team also mentioned how the developing countries, they don't have enough funds or money to use the other sources of energy, such as solar energy. So what I had said before was that the developed nations are going to have to help them out with this, because when they engage in the Paris talks, they're putting in their time to help these countries, and when they put in the time and the money, they're going to be contributing to what's happening, so they're going to be able to find different resources. And there are already a lot of resources that can be used, like wind, water, or solar energy, so then these countries are going to be able to help them with one of these resources to stop using their resources that use gas emissions. So also, the opposing team also talked about how there's increased resentment. Did your textbook land on your foot? Okay, so they also talked about how there's going to be increased resentment. But actually, the increased resentment can actually be a good thing in a way, because by this resentment, it's getting people involved in the concept. And by getting people involved, it's raising awareness, as it's a huge point in our case. So, yeah, now I'm going to be going over our side, the negation
already went over our first contention greatly in the reputations, which is of awareness. So, okay, so awareness is going to be raised with these climate talks because it's getting people involved, and it's also involving the media. As we know, like when we're doing research for this debate, we can see that this is a huge and prevalent topic in media today. So by getting this involved in media, there's going to be a lot more people getting involved as well. So that's going to help the awareness spread, and for people to stop using gas emissions and people to stop global warming. So it's not just going to be the countries doing it; it's going to be the people in the countries as well. So also, we mentioned how the problems are getting worse right now. So this is a really important topic right now. We have to act fast on this because global warming gets worse every single day. So then, by using the Paris talks, they're going to be raising awareness as our contention states. So, yeah. So also, our second contention is that the goal of the talks is not to help, or to help the effects that are already on the way. So what's happening is that this makes the plan unique because there haven't been a lot of other plans who just try to target what's happening right now. Most plans just try to go against global warming and to stop them immediately, but that's not what the Paris talks are trying to do. They're trying to stop they're not trying to stop specific incidents. They're trying to just start change and try to do other things that stop the gas emissions. Because without this, they're not going to be actually able to make a difference. So there are also other plans that have worked in the past when they involve individual countries, which is kind of what the Paris plan is doing right now. Because when, for example, when America works with these smaller plants, they're able to cut their gas emissions by almost 40%, is what we saw in our evidence. So also, in the Paris talks, the effort is coming from everybody as a whole. When the developed nations and the developing nations come together, they're able to make this difference. But it's also going to be the individual nations, because when these nations agree to be part of this plan, they're putting their name, they're putting their money, their time into this. So they're making the commitment, and they're making the promise to actually try to make a difference. So by doing this, they're going to be doing their individual efforts, and when everything comes together, they're going to be doing it as a whole, and they're going to be actually able to make a difference, because the more people we get involved in this, the more we can make a difference. So as a second speaker of the negation side, I strongly negate the resolution.
Do you need like a minute to?
Actually, wait, my mom's here, so can I do like a short? Oh yeah, okay. Anything. I can actually like. Probably should need that. Okay. Okay. God, I'm trying to remember what she wrote, but I can't remember it. Oh wait, just go over flow. What? Just go over flow. I know, but like, I mean, like. Okay. Voters issues. Wait, is that like? What's the one when it's like? Comparison. Is that one?
Two world comparison.
Yeah. Okay. That one.
So yeah, app world and net world.
I'm gonna time myself. I'm just gonna talk. Okay. So as the speaker of the negation side, I strongly negate the resolution that the Paris climate change will do more harm than good. So in the speech, I'm going to be going over the voters' issues. So the first voter issue I'm going to bring up is the comparison. So I'm going to be doing a comparison of the app side and the next side and what the impacts are going to be. So in the affirmative side, they talk about the symbolic action of what's happening and how for a long time nothing's actually been happening, and the Paris talks aren't going to actually help, and that there's going to be a lot of foreign resistance, and it's hurting foreign relationships because the developing countries and the developed nations are going to be fighting. But so in our side, we talk about how there's awareness in this, and even though, as the affirmative side mentioned, that there's going to be fighting nations, this is actually going to be raising awareness to what's happening, as we mentioned in our first contention. So by doing this, it's actually going to be helping raise awareness. So yeah, okay. So this is so hard. Okay.
Just look at impact. So what's the impact calculus?
Okay. So the impacts of this plan actually happening, and if this plan is able to pull through, what's happening is when we raise awareness, we're going to be bringing in a bunch of nations and a lot of different countries to contribute to what's happening. So when all these nations contribute, they're going to be able to make a difference. So the impact of this is going to be that the global warming is an inevitability, especially what's happening right now. So what we have to do is try to make a plan to help slow it down, how to stop it, and that's what the Paris talks are doing. So as we state that the Paris talks are going to be doing more good than harm, because by raising awareness, they're going to be bringing people in, and they're going to be making a difference. And the Paris talks, as we mentioned before, was that the goal isn't to try and stop global warming immediately, and that's actually not possible, as we mentioned, because on the outside they mentioned how there are a lot of instances where these plans have not worked out, but that's because those plans are just trying to stop what's happening, and that's not what the Paris talks are trying to do. So the impact of this is going to be good because they're going to be able to actually make a difference by pushing these plans to happen, and by putting the money and effort into this, they're going to be helping individual countries, and then when the developed nations are going to be able to help the developing nations as well. So also another related issue is time frame, because time frame, because global warming, as I mentioned before, it's an inevitability. Global warming is going to happen, especially in the day we live in today. There's a lot of bad gas emissions, and there's things constantly contributing to global warming. So by doing these Paris talks, we're going to be raising awareness, as we mentioned in our first intention. So the time frame is important because this is soon. This has to be implemented right now, because what's happening right now is prevalent to what's going. Okay, the Paris talks are going to be helping right now because they need to start right now because so time frame. So because what's happening right now is really prevalent to today, because without these Paris talks, they're not going to be raising awareness for this, and there's not actually going to be something happening. There are going to be many smaller plans that try to make a difference, but then in the long run, this is what's going to make a difference. The Paris talks, because by bringing all the developed and developing nations together, they're going to be helping make a difference as a whole. So this is a really important time, because this is when the plan needs to be implemented, and this is when we're actually going to be able to make a difference, because this is going to be our last time that we can actually try to make a change, because after global warming occurs and after it already hits, and when the developing nations get hit, it's going to be a lot harder to take back what's happened, because we can't do that. So by stopping before and giving developing nations the support they need to actually prepare themselves for what's going to happen, we're going to be helping them, and we're going to be helping the world in general, as it goes back to the criterion and net benefits. So, yeah.
Guys, I'm taking my braces off next week. I'm so
Yay. Don't run your tongue over your teeth after
Yeah,
you do
it's
because the
It's
grossest
really
feeling.
creepy.
It's like, it feels like there's a layer of like film over your teeth. It's really gross.
It's so strange.
It's like when you get your braces off and there's like the glue on your teeth.
Aren't they supposed to scratch it off?
Well, then right when they remove it, they give you
Like
some time.
before that
Yeah,
happens.
and like I made the mistake of running my tongue over. It's so gross. And I say it tastes like it's not tasteless. The mold.
Oh yeah.
When you like it, yeah. But it's good. It's okay.
That's gross.
But then it's all gonna come off, and then you never have to worry about the memory.
Yeah.
But I was-
And
did you
your
guys
teeth
get
will
your-
just feel really big and
Did you guys
slimy.
get your teeth whitened?
I'm getting them white. Well, I'm gonna start whitening them like.
Okay, later.
Okay.
Christy, go.
Okay.
This debate is not about teeth whitening.
Okay.
We can do that tomorrow.
So, as the final speaker, okay, whatever. Time starts now. As the final speaker of the affirmative team, I strongly affirm today's resolution. The Paris climate talks will do more harm than good. So, what the negation team has mentioned in their voter speech is basically how the whole entirety of the Paris talks is just focusing on awareness. However, awareness is not what we need. As both sides have agreed, global warming is a problem. So what we need is action. And what we're seeing now, if what the AFT team is saying is true, is inaction. And this is kind of contradicting towards the neg team side, because, as I quote their second speaker, we have to act fast. The affirmative team agrees. We do need to act. And awareness is not going to solve the problems that we have currently in the status quo. So our first contention was that of symbolic action. So what we see here is that we're having these talks and it's creating this illusion that change is going to happen. But through our historical references that we provided, such as through our historical references, we've seen that there has been no good outcome or no effective solution that's actually affected the status quo today. So these talks, these climate talks, or the idea of them, have been happening since the 19th century. But what we've seen is that global warming has been progressively getting worse and worse. So even if these talks are committed to change, rather than awareness, like the NEC team seems to claim, but having the talks in the first place, you already generate awareness. But even by having, but even though previous talks have had this action, even if the Paris talks do have a plan, which actually we'll be getting into, it's gonna be not effective because, as we've mentioned, it creates this illusion that we're solving, and this is bad because when we have this illusion, we're just allowing for global warming to get progressively worse and worse because we think we're actually solving it. Therefore, we don't need to be as cautious. But the truth is, the situation is bad, and by having these talks, we're creating symbolic action. So going on, they state how we go on to say how there is this whole time frame issue. So what we so under the criterion of symbolic action, under the criterion of net benefits or overall good for overall amount of people, we're actually helping the world with it. We're actually helping the world because what we see is that we're not going to be causing the sense of illusion for everyone that we're solving global warming and it's okay to keep on going with CO2 emissions. We're actually taking a stance against illusion. Okay, so second contention. Our subpoint B was that of time frame. So what we see here is like we've had there have been talks in the past, 1992, just 20 years ago, and although there's this agreement, Tokyo only enacted the plan in 2008. What does this show? Even when there are plans made, they never really enact them in the time and place that's meant to be enacted. Impact of this is that it's not actually solving the problem what was there, and they're actually allowing, by ignoring the problem for that amount of years, they're allowing the problem to get progressively worse and worse. And even later, Kyoto actually abandons their problem because there was no effectiveness. So we're seeing here that the climate talks and the outcomes of the climate talks just have no solvency, and they do not solve, and they're creating this fake illusion. So we go into foreign relations, and what they're basically saying is that what the NEC team said was about a government reputation, but I just have one thing to say is that these talks have been happening for a long time. Global warming's been getting worse. If the government really did care about their reputation, they would have done something a long time ago. And however, they haven't. So going on to our contention of foreign relations is that what we see is that so going on Paris talks right now, the idea is actually $100 billion given to developing countries. So Paris talks aren't just for awareness. There is some plan text that has been included in the Paris talk agenda. We've seen that they plan to give $100 billion. And the impact of this is what the problem is: developing countries want more money than this. And what we're seeing is that the people who are really getting hurt is the population of the developing countries, because they're the ones who are neglected the most, and they're the ones who are marginalized. And when we have this problem, we're having increased resentment toward the developed countries, because the developing country, the government is blaming all the problems on the developed countries, moreover how the developed countries are failing to take any action. However, when we're having resentment, it's a bad thing, because it's going to hinder any possible solution or any good outcomes that could have this. And even the resentment might make people more aware they're actually going to be working against the solution. So resentment is bad. So Judge, I urge you to vote. I'd urge you to vote back on symbolic action, illusion, time frame, and resentment.
Way to go over time, Christie.
I know.
Okay.
Pearl, do you have feedback?
I have baby feedback.
Okay.
Christie, terminalize. Meghan, the only thing she wanted you to do more was impacts. Meghan Swathi, she wanted warrants, but they're not here.
Okay, terminalize impacts. How do you explain what are terminalize?
So terminalize means bring it all the way out to say death, people are dying.
Oh,
We need to do
extend it.
something. Yeah.
Okay.
So things beyond just it'll hurt people.
It'll hurt.
How will it hurt people? Why does it matter that we're hurting?
Just bring more information.
Yeah.
Okay.
So to go along off of that, so for your first point, you're talking about symbolic action, which is good, but you want to talk about, so make it a lot more specific.
Okay.
Be like, you also want to explain first, sorry, backing up a little,
Yeah.
what the Paris climate talks are doing.
Okay.
What
explain more
exactly
in
they're
depth.
talking about, what are they trying to decide, where are they going to go with this, right? And then lay that out as the framework background at the beginning, and then they can't just go and argue it's just awareness.